having the Instagram audience, I think, was crucial in getting the
Mhm.
attention of agents and publishers because they want to know essentially that you can prove that there are people that care about your ideas, that trust you and know you, and that will buy from you. And
Mhm.
so it doesn't have to necessarily be an Instagram following. It can be Substack. It can be, if you have a long history of being a paid speaker or you have a large email list, just something where you can demonstrate that people care about what you have to say and that they will buy from you.
This is Unknown to Known, an on-cam ready presentation. I'm Jamie Maglietta. They say in the press that media attracts media, and it does. I believe relevancy earns that first media appearance. Relevancy is what helps you earn media. I'm a television news veteran with 20 years experience, and I created Unknown to Known to bring you professionals who are already known and those who are on the journey to get there. I also have the podcast and YouTube series Think Like a Producer. It offers media training as well as YouTube podcast reviews to help you turn your ideas into long-form content that actually moves the needle. I want you to think about being a producer, what they want, and then start positioning yourself accordingly. You have a story to tell. You just need to be heard. In order to get there, you need to be strategic about your online footprint and how you turn your personal branding into a digital footprint. When the national baby formula shortage hit and parents across the country were panicking, the press began looking for experts. And today's guest wound up on some of the biggest networks we know.
She's known as the Formula Mom. Take a look.
When it comes to feeding their babies, parents can feel a lot of pressure.
Like most parents, I had assumed that we would breastfeed, and that's just not how it turned out. I was desperate for information about how to formula feed safely and successfully, and I couldn't find any information that felt supportive, judgment-free, and research-based.
That's why infant feeding tech Mallory Whitmore created the Instagram account, The Formula Mom, a resource for other families full of practical information and support.
My goal is that parents can feed their babies confidently, even if they're using formula.
That's right. She ended up on Good Morning America and PBS NewsHour.
A nationwide shortage of baby formula is sending parents across state lines in search of their preferred brand, and some major retail chains have started rationing their supplies. Allie Rogan has more on the crisis and how parents are coping and keeping their babies fed and healthy.
75% of infants receive at least some formula by the time they're 6 months old, according to the CDC. Formula companies, like most businesses, are dealing with supply chain issues. But on top of that, one of the largest suppliers of formula announced a recall in February. To discuss this, I'm joined by Mallory Whitmore. She's a certified infant feeding specialist, and she runs the Formula Mom website.
Also wound up on Bloomberg and BuzzFeed. Mallory Thomas Whitmore had already been showing up on social media, sharing her point of view when the attention began. She was ready. She became seen as the expert because she was already showing up long before she wanted to be seen as one. See, you need to be showing up and being relevant to earn media. And that sometimes takes a long time, the long game. Now she's a published author with multiple books, including Fed Baby, Loved Baby, and her popular book, Bottle Service. And if you love fiction, head to MalloryThomas.com. If you're a parent navigating the world of infant feeding, her nonfiction book is waiting for you at bottleservicebook.com. And you can follow her on Instagram at The Formula Mom. I'll put all these links in the description. She is a mama of two, married to her husband, a self-proclaimed beach planner, and the voice that parents across the country turn to when no one else has the answers. Now, before we bring her in, I want to talk to you just for 1 second. If you're listening to this podcast, there is a good chance you have a message, a story, or an expertise that the world hasn't really heard yet. And I want to help you change that. Right now, I have a free visibility bundle available to you. It is packed with everything you need to start showing up confidently and get camera ready. And it's all about building the kind of presence that gets you noticed. Grab it from the show notes and let me know if you download it. Now, let's welcome to the Unknown to Known podcast, Mallory Thomas Whitmore. Mallory, let's start at the very beginning. Before the books, before the platform, before the Formula Mom, who were you?
It was a lot of things. And some of those things I still am, and some I am not. So I'm an identical twin. I am a wife. I live in Nashville, Tennessee, and I spent the majority of my career up until 2020 in disability services and special education. So I made a really hard left turn pivot in 2020 when COVID happened, and I had a baby at the time. He was born in 2019 and just felt, I think, like everybody, desperately in need of community, and also felt like I had outgrown some of my old life as I had welcomed kids. And it gave me opportunity. It forced me to kind of reinvent myself because my job kind of fell apart when COVID happened. And so I took a leap, and here we are 6 years later.
Let's talk about your first book. So many
Mhm.
people want to write a book, but
Yeah.
they don't know when to write the book. And you and I met at Mom Too. And when we met, you were talking about publishing your book and the variety of
Mhm.
books that you've published and what it really takes to put out that first book, that second, that third. What made you
Yeah.
want to write that first book? And why do you think you were positioned to do so at the time?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's kind of an interesting answer. I say all the time, my kids are the catalyst for all the best things I've ever done. And that's true for the books as well. So I started with a fiction book that I self-published. And essentially what happened, my daughter, who's now almost 10, when she was in kindergarten, she came home from school with her little Mother's Day packet. And, it's like fill in the blank. Like my mom's favorite food is broccoli. And she always says, stop touching that or whatever. And she brought it home, and the fill in the blank for my mom is really good at said, my mom is really good at looking at her phone. And I horrified and I cried for like 3 days, and I was filled with shame and guilt and thought that I had basically just like ruined my kids' lives. And I was like, I need these kids to see me reading instead of scrolling. And, I'm an influencer as a career at this point. And so in my mind, I'm on my phone because I'm working, but my kids don't see that. They just see that I'm on my phone. And so I had this moment where I was like, okay, instead of scrolling, I want my kids to see me reading. And then about 2 months later, after I had read a bunch of books, I was like, what if instead of just my kids seeing me consume, what if they got to see me create? And I thought maybe I could write a book. And I had always wanted to be a writer, but somewhere along the way it just didn't seem realistic, or it didn't seem reasonable. And at the time I had a full-time job and these two young kids, and all the responsibilities of adulthood. But I couldn't get it out of my mind, and I think it's a tricky thing. Sometimes I think about writing a book the same way other people might run a marathon, where it feels easier in theory to be like, "Well, I could write a book, I could run a marathon," and then you actually have to do it, and it's tricky.
So, at the time, you had been
Mhm.
growing this Instagram account
Yeah.
and you were sharing your journey about being a
Mhm.
formula mom. You
Yeah.
wanted to breastfeed, but you wound up
Mhm.
using
Yep.
formula. Bring us
Mhm.
back to that moment when you decided I needed to start showing up on
Yeah.
social media and share that journey, which
Mhm.
really brings a lot of relevancy to the book
Mhm.
Bottle Service.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, I did a hard pivot in 2020 during COVID. And when my prior job kind of dissolved, I had been working in a school system. So obviously, with COVID, all the schools shut down. When that job dissolved, I went looking for freelance work and found a job with a European import formula company, and basically convinced them to hire me as, a freelance writer. I had formula fed both of my kids. I felt really strongly about it. Um, and so I worked for them creating content for 6 months. And when my contract was up, I just had this sense of like, I have more to say about this. I feel like
Mm.
there is more to say. And I was so desperate for community because it was COVID. I was desperate to connect to other moms. I was desperate to feel not so alone. And also by that time, I had become sort of the dedicated formula mom in my group of friends.
Mm.
So I would get texts from people and they're like, you don't know me, but Emily said you know about formula. Can I ask you this question? And so I was like, I think that there's a market for this. I think there are other people that want to talk about this and want to learn and want to not feel so much guilt or shame. And so I launched it August 2020, and it took off pretty quickly, which validated my hypothesis that yes, there there was a need and a market for people that wanted high quality evidence-based formula information and support.
In the intro, I showed that you have landed some press as a result
Mhm.
of becoming this
Yeah.
niche expert in the
Mhm.
formula space. Now that your kids are older, do you
Mhm.
feel disconnected from that brand, or do you feel like you're
Mhm.
able to expand with it?
I think it depends on the day. I will say I have 11 nieces and nephews, and my daughter, who's 9, is the oldest. And so there have been babies constantly. Every year there's a new baby in the family, and we live close to the in-laws, so we see them frequently. So I still feel very plugged into like what's happening with babies and the new products and the new rules or guidelines or, different things. Sometimes I do look at my daughter, she'll be 10 in September, and think, gosh, we have lived a lifetime since I took her home and breastfeeding didn't work. And I felt like, to an extent, I felt like this was all a mistake. I had bad postpartum depression. And when you can't breastfeed, and that's the first thing that you're supposed to do to, you know, nourish your baby to keep them alive, it's easy to think, I wasn't cut out for this. And so now I look at her and she's just like this smart, creative, kind, stunning person. And I can't even fathom that at one point I felt like I was failing her. So, in that sense, yes, sometimes it feels a little distant, but I still feel so acutely what I felt then in terms of what it was like to feel like I was letting my baby down, what it was like to hide in the grocery store that I was getting formula if I saw someone that I knew, what it was like to be having conversations at the dinner table with all my sisters-in-law who breastfeed. Like that still feels very viscerally real to me. And because I can still access that, I think I'm still able to plug into the work in that way.
That's fascinating because, when I had my daughter and my son, I was one of those moms who overproduced. I had a
Okay.
fridge full
Mm.
of milk, right? Where I
Yeah.
was in the position of, I
Mhm.
felt like if I hadn't been a television news producer, it would have been a
Mhm.
great time for me to start a content channel on
Oh my
trying to
gosh,
sell my
yes.
milk, trying to sell it.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's all about identifying where you are
Mhm.
uniquely positioned and
Yeah.
talking about it. So when you
Mhm.
started your journey on
Yeah.
social media, did you primarily
Mhm.
focus on Instagram, TikTok? And
Mhm.
and how did you begin that creation? Did you see like a pickup
Yeah.
right away?
Yeah, I started on Instagram and really just exclusively on Instagram to start. And I was lucky that I joined Instagram at a time when the algorithm was really favorable to creators and it showed your content to people that followed you and people that were
Yeah.
interested in you, which, is not always the case these days. And it did pick up relatively quickly. I had an advantage, which is that prior to starting the Formula Mom, I had done a couple of podcasts talking about my experience with postpartum depression,
Mm.
including a large creator, Liesl Teen, mommy labor nurse, if you're familiar. And so when I launched my Formula Mom platform, I reached back out to her and was like, this is a little different, but any chance you would want to talk about this on the podcast? And so she had me back on and then she shared it on her platform, and that really kickstarted the growth. And then in 2022, there was a very large formula recall from Abbott, which produces Similac formulas. And within days, like 40% of the formula was gone from the shelf. It was all recalled, it was all pulled back. And so then all of a sudden, this very niche kind of knowledge that I had was very in demand. And everyone wanted to talk about formula and how to pick a different formula if you can't find the one that you want and how to save money on formula. And it was a wild time. So my growth really, really kicked up then because all of a sudden everybody was talking about this thing that I had just been talking about for a couple of years.
And that really speaks to the point that I tell all my clients and my audience here. It's like if you need to be showing up before you need press. You need to
100%.
become relevant
Mhm.
to earn media. And if
Yeah.
you're not becoming relevant and you're not
Mhm.
clear with your message, it makes it really hard for the press to see you as a niche
Mhm.
expert. Like
Yeah.
here we're watching you were on PBS News talking
Mhm.
about that recall at the time,
Yeah.
and it you can't just land press without already having built up that ability
Absolutely.
to engage with an audience, right?
Mm.
So what do you tell people? I mean, I'm imagining people probably ask, like, how do I become you? Like, how did you
Yeah.
do it?
Yeah.
What tips do you tell people, like,
Yes.
share?
Yeah. I think there's a couple of things. You have to find something that you can talk about until you're blue in the face and not get sick of it. Sometimes I'll talk to people and they're like, "Well, I'm a little bit interested in this, and this seems like a good opportunity." And I'm like, "Yes, you want to find some white space where you could fill a niche that's not currently filled, but it has to be something where you can sustain creating content about that thing 7 days a week, sometimes 3 times a day for 5 years." So pick something that you are naturally passionate about, because I also think that translates to followers. Like, we all know influencers that feel inauthentic, that feel fake, that come on and they're like, "This is the new thing I love this week." And you're like, "You loved a different skincare last week." You're just
Mhm.
trying to sell product. And so find something that you're authentically passionate about, that you can talk about forever. And I think vulnerability is the other thing. I think a huge part of my success was being able to be vulnerable and say, "This is the experience I had. This is how I felt. This is what I did. This is what I didn't do. And now I'm in a great place, and you can be in a great place too." Letting people really see themselves in your content, I think, is key.
And that really brings up a point that I also bring up here is vulnerability now helps you become more valuable later. And if you
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I'd love that you're preaching the same
Mhm.
thing. You know, I always say that you have to be real, right? So
Mhm.
relevant, you need to have a good
Yep.
expertise that you can
Mhm.
really share and know,
Yep.
and you know how to align with your audience, talk
Mhm.
to them, and
Yep.
provide them with like a likability about you so people want to
Yeah.
know, like, and trust you. And you
Mhm.
do all that really well. You're a
Yep.
prime
Thank
example
you.
of what I think
Mhm.
people should be doing with their
Yeah.
content. Do you
Mm.
feel like since you started that
Mm.
follower base has waned, or do you feel like you still get a good clip of followers, you're still growing, and you still have more opportunities on the horizon?
Yeah, I will say over the last couple of years, I have not dedicated as much time to it. I joined Bobby, which is an infant formula company, in late 2022, and so I'm leading education for them, and so it's been a little tricky to navigate both jobs essentially. And what's interesting too about this, having this audience of postpartum moms, is that your baby's only drinking formula for a year. And you need this content for a very finite amount of time versus, other niches like decluttering, for example. You're going to need decluttering tips for the rest of your life. Formula is a little bit narrower. So I would say at this point, I don't see the same sort of like massive growth that I was seeing, but I'm still seeing what I call replacement growth. So as people age out, and sometimes they'll message me and they'll be like, "I have loved following you. You're so great, but now my baby's 1 and I just need to clean up my clean up my thread, clean up my
Yeah.
feed rather." So I'm going to unfollow, but don't be offended. I would never have known if they didn't.
I would
But
have no idea. Yeah.
yeah, I would have no idea, but, like, cool, thanks. But, yes, I'm still consistently getting new people to replace the people that roll off, which means that there are new people that are ready to hear this content, to learn, to engage with it, and really that's the best thing that I could want.
This growth on Instagram, do you feel like it really helped lead to the book service book? You were sharing
Mhm.
about your journey, and
Yeah,
I want you to share it here for
yeah.
this audience.
Yeah, absolutely. So I had self-published my first book, which was a romance novel, and then knew that I wanted to write a formula book and went back and forth evaluating, do I want to self-publish it or do I want, to work with a real publisher? And because I'd already had the experience self-publishing, I was like, might as well throw my hat in the ring and, see what it's like on the other end. And so, yes, absolutely having the Instagram audience, I think, was crucial in getting the
Mhm.
attention of agents and publishers because they want to know essentially that you can prove that there are people that care about your ideas, that trust you and know you, and that will buy from you. And
Mhm.
so it doesn't have to necessarily be an Instagram following. It can be Substack. It can be, if you have a long history of being a paid speaker or you have a large email list, just something where you can demonstrate that people care about what you have to say and that they will buy from you, whether it's, your own digital products or other people's products as an affiliate, whatever. They want to know that you have that influence because
Mhm.
it minimizes their risk, right? If they're going to invest in you, pay you in advance, produce your book, take the time to pay all the people necessary to produce it, they want to know that it has a reasonable chance of being successful, that they can recoup that money. So I don't think that if I had not had the platform that I do, I don't think that I would have been able to publish the book with Simon and Schuster. And you want to believe that publishing is a meritocracy, like, well, I'm the expert on this, so of course they should let me publish a book. But it's a business. It's a business like anything else. And you can have the most expertise and you can be the smartest and you can write the best book. But if they can't see a way that people are going to learn about it and buy it, they're not going to acquire the book. And I think it's worse now than ever because our attention is so fragmented. There's a million things trying to steal our attention between social media and TV and everything else, the like constant 24-hour news cycle. And there's also now AI and ChatGPT. And like, why would someone buy my book instead of asking Claude or whatever? And so being able to demonstrate that you have a plan and that you have an audience is really, really helpful.
I had on a literary agent, and she was talking
Mhm.
about this with me and how engagement is really essential for them
Mhm.
to make a decision about you, because essentially they're placing their bets on
Mm.
you as a
Yeah.
writer. They want to
Mhm.
make sure that they are going to potentially get their money
Yeah.
back that they're handing you, and that
Mhm.
money that they give you is essentially them saying, "We believe you will make 50,000."
Yep. Mhm.
And
Yeah.
there's this process in place that a lot of people don't wanna be a part of it because they think that
Mhm.
by being with a traditional publisher, they're not getting
Mhm.
as much support, or they're giving
Yeah.
away their IP. But in a lot
Mhm.
of ways, it can be very useful. So when we met
Mhm.
at Mom 2, you were talking
Yeah.
about the differences of traditional
Mhm.
and non
Yes.
traditional hybrid
Mhm.
publishing. Do you mind
Yeah.
sharing a little bit about the differences
Mhm.
and maybe
Yeah.
even how you can market those books in different ways?
Yeah. Yeah. So the three big areas that they differ is the money, whether you're fronting the cost or whether someone's paying you to write the book, how fast you can get the book to market, and then distribution channels. So traditional publishing, someone's going to pay you in advance and they are going to manage all of the production pieces. So they will edit it, they'll provide a cover designer, they will format it, all of that. Self-publishing, you are your own publisher, so you have to figure out how to do all that, which often involves paying people to do it. I'm not a graphic designer, so I'm going to pay someone to do my cover. And then the second piece is timing. So self-publishing, I could write a book in 6 weeks, which I have done once. I will not do it again. It was like I was manic. It was bad. It was not good. But I could write a book in 6 weeks. I could spend 2 weeks editing it, getting everything lined up, and put it up on Amazon KDP, and the whole thing took 2 months. Traditional publishing typically takes 2 to 3 years, so it's a lot longer. So you have to know that you're in it for the long haul. And then in terms of marketing, at this point, no matter how you publish your books, you're going to be expected to market it. I think back in the day, people felt like if Penguin Random House or Simon and Schuster or whoever picks up my book, I can be like a hermit that, writes in a cabin in the woods and they'll sell it. That's no longer the case. But with traditional publishing, you do have the advantage of having people on a team that are doing at least some of the marketing work for you, and generally the sort of marketing work that you couldn't do yourself if you're self-publishing. So things like getting bookstore placement at big box stores or independent retailers, getting placements in festivals, getting trade reviews, getting on book lists and submitting to People Magazine for cover reveals and that sort of stuff. And so while you will need to market no matter how you publish, there are some advantages to the traditional publishing sort of marketing wheelhouse that are just really hard to replicate on the self-pub end.
Mhm. Unless you're hiring, like, a PR firm.
Yes, absolutely. And some people do. And I do
Mhm.
think that can be helpful, but again, it's expensive. So if you're funding the whole thing, It can be a lot. And honestly, sometimes traditionally published folks will also hire a publicist using the money from their advance just so that they have more dedicated support, especially if they're not a lead title, if they're not, like the big book of the season that their publisher is going to invest in. It can be
Yeah.
helpful to bring in some outside help.
Traditional publishing has seen a
Mhm.
25% decline. And I am shocked by that, but it makes sense now that you're saying how everyone's attention is fragmented. It also makes me wonder, if we're seeing a rise in self publishing because of how
Mhm.
easy it is with
Yep.
KDPs. When you
Mhm.
are making a decision about how to publish a book, because you have
Mhm.
nonfiction and your fiction, what do you look for when you're putting out a
Mhm.
title?
Yeah, I think it's crucial to know your genre and where those readers are acquiring their titles. So I write primarily romance and fiction, and romance is huge on Book Talk on TikTok. A lot of those folks will also read through a service called Kindle Unlimited, where you pay a monthly subscription fee to Amazon. It's typically like $12 a month. And then you can read any book that's enrolled in this program. And so I know the majority of romance readers are enrolled in this program. So I'm going to self publish so I can opt into that program. So knowing your genre, knowing the expectations, knowing how your readers read versus if I was publishing something that was like, high literary fiction, the majority of those people, those readers are still coming to those books from like Oprah's book club or the New York Times book review. And if I want to have the possibility of being in those avenues, I'm going to need a traditional publisher. So just like doing a deep dive and really thinking about what's the genre of what you're producing and how and where do those readers find those books and how do they read those books, like in what format, can be really helpful in making that decision.
And you bring up a point that I want to circle back now to about the importance of the publisher and more
Mhm.
of the impact of the publisher and how that may affect your PR and your outreach and your
Mhm.
bookability. So do
Yeah.
you feel like having one of the big 5 is
Mhm.
important to really land media?
I think it is dramatically helpful. I think, if you have, an independent PR person that you hire, or if you are just personally very good at pitching, I think you have a chance, depending on if you can hit the right topic and the right person at the right time. I think the benefit of having a traditional publisher is that it comes with established credibility when you're pitching. So even if I'm going to pitch something myself versus, my publicist at Simon and Schuster, the fact that Simon and Schuster was willing to invest in me lends credibility as I'm doing this outreach. Obviously, anything that comes directly from my publisher is even more helpful. And they also have years and years and years of connections to all sorts of different, media outlets. Not what's the word I'm thinking of? Outlets.
Media outlets.
Media outlets, all sorts of different media outlets, uh, that would be hard for me to even try to replicate those
Mhm.
relationships.
And I didn't get a chance to see if you made a top list. Did you make the bestseller list
I did
with bottle
not.
service?
No, I did not make USA Today or New York Times. I did make some of Amazon's top new releases for various categories. And that's okay. That's okay. And I had to talk to myself about that and also my publisher about it because again, this topic, formula feeding, is so time dependent. And so typically, especially when you're with a traditional publisher, the big deal is to get pre orders because all those pre orders count to your first week of sales. So if you get 6,000 people to pre order over 8 months, then it looks like you've sold 6,000 copies in the first week and you can hit USA Today, sometimes New
Mhm.
York Times. But for a book like mine, 8 months before it releases, 6 months before it releases, either their baby's not here yet, or by the time it releases, their baby's already off of formula. And so
Mm.
I used to hear from folks all the time. They're like, I need your book. I want your book, but I need it right now. Like,
Can you give me a free version? Yeah.
yes. And so I was like, because yeah, so it was a hard sell getting people to pre-order because the folks who were going to have a baby by the time it released generally still thought they were going to breastfeed. And the people who knew they needed it before it was going to be released. So I am thrilled that it's having a longer tail on the back end in terms of sales and momentum than it did on the front end, just
Mhm.
because of the sort of nuance of that, discrete time period.
So do you think you'll update the book?
I don't know. I think I would love to if it makes sense. It's gone into a second printing, so it's sold better than Simon& and Schuster anticipated, which is lovely. And we'll see if it goes into a third, fourth, whatever printing. I would have the opportunity to update it if anything material
Mhm.
changes. So, I mean, honestly, what's happening at the FDA currently, every other day, I'm like, what? So there may need to be an update at some point if material regulations change or anything like that.
Mhm. And weighing in on those news topics can really help you start
Absolutely.
positioning
Yeah.
yourself. I tell people this all the time. What is your take on using stories like the FDA and sharing a point of view on that in your social
Mhm.
media? Do you see that as opportunity to potentially
Oh,
attract the
absolutely.
press?
Yeah,
Good.
absolutely. I think especially right now in our current climate, there's a lot of uncertainty about who you can trust, and that includes the FDA and the CDC and some of these agencies that historically we would say, yes, of course you could trust them. Maybe before COVID, we lost a lot
Mhm.
of societal trust then. And so I think being able to position yourself as an expert and to respond to stuff that's coming out of there and say, hey, if you feel conflicted or uncertain or unsure, or you don't know how to interpret this, or this feels concerning to you, hello, I'm here. Come follow me and I'll help you
Yeah.
interpret it, I think is wildly helpful.
So do you think that you are now known in your niche, or do you feel like you're still on
Mhm.
that journey of unknown to known?
I think I'm pretty known. I think I like to think. I don't know. I don't want to think too highly of myself. But I really do think that if people are looking for sort of a go-to thought leader in the infant formula space, that I'm probably in the top 5. And that feels like a good place to be.
What's one thing that you would say really helped you become known? Was it the social
Mhm,
media, the book, a combination,
mhm.
legitimate press? What would you say?
Yeah, man, I'm all of the above, but I think the platform and the sort of social proof that I have an opinion that's worth listening to. This and that's the same thing that I'd mentioned helps, convince a publisher to take a chance on your book. I think, I say all the time, I'm not a doctor. I do not have a PhD in nutrition. I am my background is in special ed. I am an unlikely formula influencer from that standpoint. But I think I am a researcher by training and was working on a large research grant before all the Formula Mom stuff happened, which I think helps. But I think, I don't know, being authoritative, even if you're not a traditional authority, because you've shown that you know what you're talking about, that people trust you, especially if you can get endorsements from other people that are authorities. My favorite thing, I have Dr. Mona, who's a pediatrician, blurbing on the front of my book, right? She should be the authority, but instead she's like, read Mallory's book. She knows what she's talking about. Yeah, I think a lot of it is the social proof. And then a lot of it is also just being able to back up what you say with evidence, with endorsements. Yeah.
Yeah. I love hearing all that because I help package people before they start
Hmm.
positioning themselves for media,
Yeah.
positioning themselves for a literary agent. And it's mainly
Hmm.
because there's so many missed opportunities that people
Hmm.
take on that road to becoming
Yeah.
known. And I'm just trying to help as someone in television news. I'm always
Mm.
looking for experts like yourself who
Yeah.
are on that journey, who have become known and are
Hmm.
able to share this type of expertise. So I really do appreciate that. In
Hmm.
your bio, you say, like, you're an open book.
Hmm.
So, what was
Yeah.
one big challenge that you remember having to overcome on this journey?
Yeah. Oh man. I think, a challenge that I didn't expect. And I will say, I started the Formula Mom as sort of a passion project. I did not intend to grow it into a business. I did not intend to set out to write a book. I didn't intend to become an influencer. And so maybe I wasn't prepared because I hadn't approached it with that initial goal. But the breastfeeding and the formula feeding debate is really emotionally fraught, and people have a lot of thoughts and feelings about it. And being so vulnerable to share my own personal experience, and also knowing it's not just my experience, it's also the experience of my daughter, who can't consent to me talking about, her infancy necessarily. I didn't expect the sort of troll comments that I consistently get, you know, and this is nothing that other people who share vulnerably on the internet haven't heard. But, people calling me lazy, people saying if I wasn't going to do everything possible to try to breastfeed, I shouldn't have had kids, that people like me don't deserve kids, that
Wow.
I am predatory, that, I mean, just a picture of me that someone drew with devil horns, like absolutely crazy stuff. And so that has been a challenge for me to overcome, of saying it is more important to me that I'm still vulnerable, even if it means I'm, in one way or another, inciting this sort of insanity in response, because I know that it's not just me who's seeing it. It's all these other formula moms who are also seeing it. And so they need to see the vulnerability too, and not just the judgment.
Mm. And what's next for you? When we were talking at Mom 2, you said that you had
Mhm.
another book coming up, and I believe you
I
mentioned it
do.
earlier, but tell us about this book, because it's not anything to do
Yes.
with bottle feeding.
It is not. No, it's another rom-com. It's called Double Standard. It comes out with a small press, so another traditional publisher, but not a big five, a small romance-specific imprint called 831 Stories. So it comes out in July, and it's just fun. It's fake dating and a celebrity and a stunt double. And I've just had so much fun with it
Mm.
because, and especially at this stage of my life, I'm turning 40 in the fall. Almost everything I do is in service of either my job or my family, whether that's my parents or my kids or my husband or the household. And so having something that I do just for the fun of it, because I love it, because it makes me feel like myself, because it brings me joy, has been so lovely. So I'm excited. I'm excited for it to come out. I'm excited to see how it goes. And I'm excited to continue writing. I think, I plan to stay in this formula education space for a while, and continue to do the fiction writing on the side, and just sort of see where the journey takes me.
You have a lot of hats.
I do. I do, but I like it that way. I can't
Yeah.
sit still. If I didn't, I'd
Oh.
find something else.
So, someone listening to this right now might have a book inside them, a
Yes. Yeah.
message, they're afraid
Mhm.
to share. Would you tell them to maybe start sharing their point of view on social media first and
Yes,
test the waters?
absolutely. Absolutely, yes. Yeah, it can be really helpful for a couple of reasons. Number one, if down the line you want to sell the book either to individual readers or to a publisher, having a built in audience is only going to be helpful. There's no downside to having an audience before that book is ready. And then the other thing, too, is you can get real time feedback about whether your ideas are hitting or not. You don't want to write an entire book and then realize that people feel lukewarm about this idea. So it can be really helpful to get started early, and it doesn't have to be a huge audience. You can start with 10 people. You can start with your 5 friends and their 2 neighbors, start small. But it can be helpful to get that feedback in real time so that you're not going down a direction that you can't pull back from down the line.
And if you had to give someone tips that are new to social media, what would
Yes.
you say to them about showing up on camera? Anything
Mhm.
that you learned from your beginnings that you wouldn't mind giving as some parting pieces of advice?
I would just reiterate, be as authentic as you can. I think it's more important than ever now that we're getting into this AI space where, there are AI influencers. You don't know what's real or not.
Mm.
You don't know if that image is true. I think it's going to become more important than ever for people to show up in their messy human selves, as their messy human selves, because people are going to get more and more desperate for that, and we already are desperate for it. But I think, especially now, it's going to become even more important because people are going to be looking for that.
Yeah. No, that's really great. Thank you, Mallory. And everyone who's listening, make sure you check the show notes. There'll be links to everything Mallory has mentioned. And thanks again, Mallory.
Of course, thanks for having me. This was such a great conversation.
All right. If this podcast or show that you're watching on YouTube is resonating with you, I hope you'll follow us on your podcasting platform of choice or subscribe to us on YouTube. Heck, if you love this, I really hope you'll even leave a comment and share it with a friend. Just takes 30 seconds.